Hi, I'm Harold Bell, the founder and creator of the original Inside Sports, the radio sports talk show that sets the standard for sports talk shows in America today. In 1971, the original Inside Sports was one of a kind. It was unrecognized, unparalleled, uncompromised, uncensored, and still unsung. Today, here on Inside Sports, we're going to take a look back, go back as far as 1986. And my special guest is considered one of the greatest athletes in American history. We will be talking to him about the rumors that he wanted out of the NFL Hall of Fame. Now, his career in the NFL was just fantastic. He played in the NFL for 9 years and won 8 rushing titles. Also, in this segment, we'll talk about the late, great Nelson Mandela and how he left South Africa a better place than he found it and his trials and tribulations. So sit back and relax as we talk to my man, Jim Brown.
Jim, tell me something, man. I understand now there's a rumor going around that you want out of the Hall of Fame. I was not aware of this until last Wednesday. One of the listeners called and said, "What is this about Jim Brown wanting out of the Hall of Fame? Don't want to be associated with the Hall of Fame. What is that all about, Jim?"
Well, Harold, I was a very astute reporter in Dayton, Ohio. I did a banquet there, amateur pro athlete banquet with a lot of real great athletes, and was interviewed and pointed out that there were a lot of isms being used in the Hall of Fame: favoritism, racism, nepotism, good old boyism, all of those things, along with politics and discrimination. He chose to pick racism as the only ism that I said. In other words, he thought that, of course, it would be inflammatory, which it was, to the American public. And it was picked up around the country, and it said that Jim Brown wanted to be removed from the Hall of Fame because it was a racist organization, which was not true. I pointed out to him that John Mackey, who's a very good friend of mine and probably the greatest tight end that ever lived, had been exempted from the Hall of Fame. And no one has ever given a reason for that. I also pointed out that Lynn Swann, if there's an end better than Lynn Swann, I don't know who he is. He's not in the Hall of Fame. And of course, Al Davis. Now, the point that I was making is that the Hall of Fame should be a place where the standards are already set and high. They should not be changed by the whims of man. It should have nothing to do with anything other than the ability of the individual. So I know that they did not like Al Davis, but I wanted them to tell the American public why Al Davis couldn't get in, why John Mackey wasn't in, and what's the criteria for a guy like Lynn Swann to get in. So it was an overall thing dealing with the high standard that should be always present in an institution like the Hall of Fame.
Jim, once again, is how the media tends to want to carry a story like that and what they want to put in the story. Of course, like you said, they had no idea. A lot of us had no idea that, of course, Al Davis was mentioned. Lynn Swann, of course, they used the racism thing. Of course, when you mentioned John Mackey, we are one of the very few individuals that have been talking about John Mackey, why he hasn't been inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I was appalled to find out that you brought to my attention that there was a sports writer in Baltimore who looked like he was holding up the whole show because you have to get the support from your city that you played in. And this is another thing that we brought up while we were in Miami. There's a group called the National Black Journalists Association, and about 14 of us met. And I brought that up, and I thought it was something that they need to look into as a group. Why is it that we can have one sports writer in Baltimore holding back a brother like John Mackey? I understand too. They brought up that Harold, well, he got several cronies that he has probably lobbied, and you need more than just that one, and that he has probably convinced them that to keep John Mackey out of the Hall of Fame. We cannot let personalities get involved in accomplishments that have already been set, like you said, man. And we got to try and kind of change this thing around, Jim.
Well, I'll tell you something, Harold. I will actually withdraw my name if something isn't done. Now, I know that there are a lot of people now across the country that's talking, and they're very serious about it. And once they hear the points that I make, they really become an advocate of change. Well, let me say to you. I talked to Chuck Heaton the other morning. Heaton writes for the Plain Dealer in Cleveland. And he pointed out that he didn't want me to leave the Hall of Fame. He was on the committee. Sometimes, you know, they favor the hometown guys. Sometimes someone might not like someone, but overall it's pretty fair. And I brought up the Mackey situation. He said, well, some guys said Mackey didn't have good hands.
Yeah, that was the great Jim Brown. And he was absolutely right, man. There's a lot of things that go on, the politics that go on behind the scene, where certain guys aren't elected to the Hall of Fame because somebody don't like him or somebody said he couldn't catch, he didn't have great hands. When this man was chosen the greatest tight end in the past 50 years, but he can't get in the Hall of Fame. The same type of thing happened to my friend Willie Wood here in Washington, D.C. They blackballed him out of the NFL and out of the Hall of Fame until I had to go out and lobby for Willie to get in the Hall of Fame because this guy deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. Vince Lombardi said that Willie Wood was his coach on the field. And Willie Wood was really one of the great defensive backs of all time. So when he was finally inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1988, man, I was really relieved because he deserved to be there. So the politics that go on in sports and in our communities, you know, there's no place for it. We got to let people smell the flowers while they're still living. We're going to come back and we're going to talk with Jim about Nelson Mandela and the great late Nelson Mandela and his trials and tribulations in South Africa and how he left it a better place than he found it. So don't go anywhere, okay? I'll be right back.